Hey, what's up everyone? Thunderbob here, and with the impending release of Resident Evil Village, I've decided to go back and play Resident Evil 3, a game that I missed at launch. I've played nearly every Resident Evil game, but somehow I skipped both Resident Evil 3 Remake and the original Resident Evil 3 Nemesis for the PlayStation 1. I've enjoyed the series immensely and have really been amazed at how well they've transitioned out of the weak middle years of Resident Evil 5 and 6 to create some truly amazing games like Resident Evil 7 and the Resident Evil 2 Remake. Resident Evil 3 takes place concurrently with the events of Resident Evil 2, though you do see the city from a different perspective, that of Jill Valentine and Carlos. Jill is simply trying to escape the city and expose Umbrella as the cause of the outbreak, while Carlos is an Umbrella employee with a mysterious motive. Unfortunately, this remake does not quite live up to the high bar set by its predecessors. It's quite a bit shorter than Resident Evil 2, which was already a short game. My playthrough took around 6 hours. The single playthrough of Resident Evil 2 Remake, by comparison, was around 8 hours, and the game also gave you an incentive to play through multiple times. The game also feels considerably more streamlined. It lacks much of the exploration and backtracking that made the police station so much fun in the previous game. While the city streets are interesting, the locations are limited, and it feels much more on rails, like the game's holding your hand. You even visit several of the same locations, but in a much more truncated and limited fashion from the previous game. An already short game has about a third of its runtime spent on existing locations from Resident Evil 2. The expected enemies all show up: zombies, lickers, hunters, but the biggest and most constant threat is the Nemesis. This giant tyrant-like monster is present through much of the game and makes up nearly every boss fight. While it does not chase you for long periods of time like Mr. X did in the previous game, it does show up frequently and provide some exciting set pieces. I did find several of the boss fights against Nemesis overly easy and very long, and I wish the game had a bit more diversity during these fights. If you've played Resident Evil 2 Remake, the gameplay is nearly identical here, with just a few small tweaks. You have a dodge move now, which is useful for evading the weaker enemies, and makes the boss fights that much easier. The selection of weapons is good, and how they're divided between the characters makes sense. But you do get a ton of ammo and supplies, and the game starts to veer more into action game territory and away from the survival horror genre. There's also a multiplayer component that plays like a cross between Resident Evil and Left 4 Dead, but I didn't seem to enjoy it very much and only played a couple of rounds. The graphics are quite good, though much of it feels ripped right out of its predecessor. Performance in particular is spectacular. My RTX 3080 and i7 10700K was able to run the game at 3440 by 1440 with every setting maxed out and maintain a nearly constant 144 frames per second. The sound and music are also quite good, effective, and scary, and create a rather tense atmosphere during the game. The voice acting has some cheesy moments to it, but I feel like that's in keeping with the Resident Evil spirit. Overall, this is an enjoyable entry in the series, but the lack of content and depth, and how similar it is to the previous game, make it difficult to recommend at full price. Luckily, this game can be found on sale frequently for $20, and at that price point, I think it's well worth checking out, especially if you're a fan of the series looking for more before the release of Resident Evil Village. As always, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, please feel free to check out some of my other reviews, and think about subscribing. I would appreciate it. Have a great night.